gamers and goblins, my name's Cara. Welcome to the Homeworld 3 sponsored series. They're really paying me to make all these videos. Check out my link in the description if you want to play Homeworld 3. You can buy it today on Steam or the Epic Game Store. Today we're having an in-depth look at the factions in Homeworld 3. We're gonna dive into the unique aspects that define each fleet and how their strengths and weaknesses shape your strategies on the battlefield. So we'll start with the Kaldan Raiders. They're only a faction in the campaign mode. I don't think there's any other way to play them. When you see them, they're the remnants of the Kaldan Empire. They kind of got crushed between you and the Anomaly in the story mode. It's sort of sad. They're not really a real faction in the same way that the other two are. Honestly, it just looked better for the thumbnail. Sorry. Now let's start with the Hiigarians, the first real faction, the one that you play in the Wargames mode, either co-op or single player, and throughout the whole campaign. We'll start with the Hiigarian Strikecraft. The Hiigarians offer recons, interceptors, and bombers. Recons can speed up for a period at the cost of reduced damage, making them pretty effective scouts and skirmishers. Interceptors, built to counter other strikecraft, can enhance their damage output by sacrificing armor, and bombers, designed for larger targets, can cloak for stealthy attacks, although firing reveals them and breaks their cloak. It's kind of like how it worked in FTL if you ever played that game. The Hiigarians have a single Corvette type, the Railgun Corvette. It's really good against larger or static targets and it has a triple shot ability for that extra punch, although that doesn't really drastically change its role in battle. It can be pretty useful, but again, it's the only Corvette that they have. Kind of squishy, does a lot of damage. Next up, we have the Hiigarian frigates, and their frigates bring a lot more diversity. Their lineup includes the Assault Frigate, the Ion Cannon Frigate, the Torpedo Frigate, the new Suppression Frigate, and the Support Frigate. Each frigate has their own unique abilities. Assault frigates can boost armor at the cost of speed, Ion frigates can overcharge their weapons, and Torpedo frigates can extend their range by reducing their speed. So now they'll be even further behind the rest of your units. They literally go to max range always to fire their torpedoes. I have no idea why. Now for the Hiigarian capital ships. The Hiigarian capital ships are the Carrier, Destroyer, and Battle Cruiser. The Carrier can temporarily boost its production speed by disabling its defense guns. Destroyers are versatile and powerful. They can unleash a barrage of missiles without any drawbacks. Battle Cruisers, the biggest ship you can build, can boost the damage of nearby ships while disabling their own weapons for a tactical edge. Now we cut to the Incarnate faction. They're only available in multiplayer skirmish mode, and they're a very mysterious and formidable opponent, at least in the campaign. In skirmish mode, a lot of their stats are sort of similar to the Hiigarians. While they share some similarities with the Hiigarians, they do bring their own unique flavor to the table. Incarnate Strikecraft. The Incarnate combined the Hiigarian Strikecraft into a single multi-role fighter, the Dominance Fighter. This consolidation means that there aren't as many Strikecraft, but then in exchange have a broader range of corvettes, which are sort of like their medium units, as opposed to the bombers for the Hiigarians. So their dominance fighters are pretty good all-around units, but they're not great at anything like the interceptors or recon units are. Now for the Incarnate Corvettes. The Incarnate Corvettes include the Assault Corvette, which are reasonably effective against smaller craft, the Plasma Corvette, which is a robust bomber-like unit, and the Disruption Corvette, which can debilitate enemy ships by reducing their speed and damage output. They also have a dedicated Capture Corvette, which helps you capture enemy ships. It's sort of an interesting mechanic. It's a shame that you can't play the Incarnate in the Wargames mode, because that would be super fun. Next up are the Incarnate Frigates. Frigates for the Incarnate are pretty similar to the Hiigarian ones. The Attack and Multi-Beam Frigates mirror the Hiigarian Assault and Ion Cannon Frigates respectively. Some slightly different stats, but they're basically identical. The Missile Frigate is akin to a missile-based version of the Hiigarian Suppression Frigate, so it has a lot of like combat versatility to roll sort of frigate design. So their frigates are pretty good too, they just mirror the Incarnate ones, basically one-to-one. And now for the Incarnate capital ships. The Incarnate capital ships include the Carrier, Destroyer, and Battle Cruiser. A lot of the other benefits that the Incarnate have do sort of balance it out. They have their own Incarnate mothership, which, unlike the Hiigarian mothership, it can't gather resources on its own, so it's much more single focused. Along with specialized anti-strike craft and anti-capital turrets. The Hiigarians generally have the upper hand. You can unlock powerful units earlier, like interceptors and bombers, instead of going all the way up to corvettes to do that. So you can kind of outnumber and overwhelm the Incarnate's initial forces and win the early game pretty easily. But as the game progresses, both factions have similar frigate options, and the Incarnate have way better corvettes. Like, the Hiigarians literally only have one. So the Incarnate might take the advantage later on in the game, but then by the end of the game, when everyone gets frigates and everything, then it's pretty much back to being tied again. But I'm sure it doesn't make enough of a difference to determine a battle or anything. I'm sure the Incarnate can be just as good if played by a skilled opponent as the Hiigarians can be too. Yeah, so I guess if you're playing as a Hiigarian player, the strategy would be to focus on leveraging your early game advantage by spamming a lot of interceptors and bombers so that you can target the Incarnate's resource operations. The mothership can't gather any resources on its own, so if you take out their resource ships, you can really hold them back for a while. You can use cloaked bombers to raid them, and then as the game progresses, you can diversify your fleet by getting frigates and capital ships like faster than the Incarnate if you pull that off successfully. For Incarnate players, you want to make the most of your versatile corvettes and focus on capturing enemy ships to turn the tide. So that's the specific faction overview of both factions, the Hiigarians and the Incarnate, explained. If you want to check out the other videos in this sponsored Homeworld series, thank you to Gearbox for that. Check out the linked playlist to see all 9 of these videos. And if you want to play Homeworld 3 yourself, you can check it out using my link in the description below. You can buy it today on Steam and the Epic Game Store. Thanks a bunch for watching. In the next video, we'll talk about the War Games Battle Guide.